Get ready to enter a brave new world with your host, Vasant Dhar.
For more color on the podcast and additional commentary, please subscribe to my newsletter at vasantdhar.substack.com. Hello, and welcome to Brave New World. My guest today is Léon Bottou, who recently joined the Flatiron Institute in New York after many years at Facebook AI research called FAIR. Léon is probably best known for pioneering the development of stochastic gradient descent as a fundamental learning algorithm in machine learning, work that's had an enormous impact on the field. Léon is also a philosopher at heart who asks deeper questions about AI, beginning with what it even means for a machine to be intelligent. He's written a wonderful short article called The Fiction Machine that I highly recommend. Léon, welcome to Brave New World. Delighted to have you on the show.
Thank you.
So before we start, I usually ask my guests to tell us something about themselves, like where they grew up, what influenced them, and how you got into this great new world of AI.
So I was born in France, in the countryside, relatively well-to-do family. My grandparents were lawyers. My parents, my uncles, were doctors. And I studied in a lot of boarding schools because I was quickly sent away to first 60 kilometers, then 200, then eventually to Paris. And I went through the typical French system, deux classes préparatoires, grandes écoles. And then I started to think, what do I want to do? And this is when I read there was the Sejnowski paper about learning how to read aloud with one of my friends there. And we decided, this is cool, let's try to redo it.
That was in the 80s, right?
86.
Yeah, right.
And we redid it. And it worked. We did it with digits, actually. And so I decided, I want to go further with that thing. I started to look into this world of artificial neural networks. At the time, there were the Hopfield models that the physicists were working on. And I didn't like it because it was not nearly as effective. By asking some friends, I found this guy named Yann who was finishing his PhD, hadn't finished yet. We concocted a kind of story saying that my end of studies internship wouldn't be done in some company, but with him as a master, I hid the fact that he didn't have his PhD yet.
So when did you meet Yann? What year was it?
86. And we wrote a simulator for neural networks at that time. I had an Amiga 1000, he had an Amiga 1000. Cooked a kind of a makeshift modem with Minitel parts so that we could talk to each other. And we wrote the first simulator that we used. That was the one Yann used in AT&T later to do convolutional networks. And it's been refined. Now the nth version of this is called Lush. And as of 2010, it was still quite used. Not anymore. But it lasted 24 years, which is good for a piece of software. So after that, I'd find a person to do a thesis. So that's François Faugelman, who was an advisor of Yann as well, informal advisor of Yann. It was a strange thesis because we had to change universities several times. That was not very fashionable. One of my professors in École Polytechnique told me, why do you want to do a thesis in a discipline that doesn't exist? You should just do theoretical physics. But I was stubborn, like a donkey. I don't know if I knew, because I thought that, this thing is working so well, in 5 years it's going to be everywhere. It took 25 years. So, that's the beginning.
So, Léon, you've been in the field for a long time. I mean, I'm guessing 35 plus years.
86, right? 25.
So going on to almost 40 years.
Yeah.
Are you surprised by where we've gotten to, how far we've gotten over the last 40 years? And I ask this because I'm surprised myself.
Well, at the time of the CNNs, so the first rebirth of deep learning, I was surprised it took such a long time. I thought it would be much faster to have vision system. The large language models surprised me because I didn't think, actually there is you can make a back-of-envelope calculation showing that to train a large language model to do anything useful, you really need a lot of data. And I didn't think that people would get that lot of data. but they did.
So where do you see the magic in AI these days? Since
I don't believe in magic. I mean, I started study this field.
Yeah.
It's not just to make a smart machine. It's to understand what intelligence is, our own. So the idea of making smart machines without understanding how they work is anathema for me. I don't want that. I'm not interested. I believe that this is an opportunity to be able to say something smart about intelligence, not just machine, but also us. How it works, what it means. And that's very deep. That's a lot more interesting than just cooking up a machine and trying to sell it.
And yet here we are. We've got these machines that seem to be pretty amazing, right? They talk, right? Which is a huge deal because they weren't capable of talking for a long time.
Talking is a huge deal.
Yeah.
But doesn't mean they're smart.
Well, but to talk, and let me just sort of play devil's advocate here. I mean,
you need to know things. Yes.
You need to know things to talk, right? So in order to produce like a coherent, cogent kind of a piece of text, you need to know what you're talking about, and these machines sure seem to know what they're talking about.
You can produce a cogent piece of text that's like Harry Potter. It's that happens in a world that is not ours.
I know, but at the same time, I guess the machine seems to like understand, quote unquote, what we are saying to it because it seems to come back with something coherent. Like most of the time, right?
It's not the same thing.
It's not the same thing as well.
It's a form of knowledge.
Yeah.
But it's a form of knowledge that's different from knowing the truth. If you look at what people expect from these machines, you have two kinds of expectations that are in opposition. Yeah, some people expect creative machines. They're going to give you interesting association of ideas. They're going to help you write things. And if you want a creative machine, there are two things to remark. First, the machine doesn't need to know the truth that much. If it only says the truth, it's not going to do what you want. The second thing, you want this machine to be private. Because if you share your thought with a machine, you don't want that machine to be on some distant server controlled and seen by somebody else. Because if you tell everything you think to somebody, this somebody can make you think anything they want. Too dangerous. Has to be local. Now, the other thing is the machine that tells the truth, the oracle, the super search engine. And you see this in a lot of the commercial propositions that you have nowadays, where the machine is supposed to be an oracle you can trust. And what you discover is that these machines are very large because they need to know a lot of facts. And you cannot trust them too much, in fact. If you look, for instance, in Google, the little AI summary you have at the beginning has a lot of invention inside that have nothing to do even with the reference they're citing. It just doesn't get it. Now it's normal because the more you constrain a machine to be close to some truth, the less the machine has space to think. I'll give you an example. This one I like. Suppose I tell you the story of a historical battle. Everything right? No. Everything correct, factual. On that day, at that time, this general made that decision. Same day, a little bit later, the troops moved that way, and so on. Everything that happens. You can know this story by heart. You haven't understood anything. To understand the story, you must be able to answer questions like, well, if this general had made a different decision, what could have been the possible outcomes? If it had been winter instead of summer, would have it been different? So to understand the story, you need to make up in your mind stories that are not true and be able to continue them. So your notion of understanding something is based on scenarios you make in your mind that are not true. Now, how do you make these scenarios? That's interesting too. You don't make these scenarios because you have an experience in historical battles. I don't know how many historical battles you've been in, but not so many. Maybe you read about historical battles in books. But if you think about it, most of those you read about, they were fake. They were invention, they were fiction. So let's summarize. You understand the factual story of the historical battle by conjuring counterfactual scenarios that didn't happen. Yeah. And you do it by using knowledge that you have acquired from fiction, not from real battles, really. So if you think about this, you realize that if you try to constrain a machine to not say anything that's not factual, it's not going to understand much.
So let's push on this notion of understanding. It reminds me of a paper by Marvin Minsky from also the 80s. I think it was called Music, Mind, and Meaning or something, where he says that, I'm recollecting, so this is not going to be perfect, but he said something like, understanding really means that you can keep turning something around in your head and never come to a stop. That you can almost like look at it in many, many different ways. And
ways that are not factual.
So understanding, well, I mean, he's not talking about truth or
yes,
factual,
I know,
right?
But
he's
knows
saying
better.
That it's really all about kind of turning it around. And I think that's what you're saying when you say, well, you read about something, but you don't really understand it unless you situate it sort of with your own experience, or you make up things, or you've experienced battles.
I don't say situated with your experience, because you don't have experience with story.
It could be a general,
but that's
right?
rare.
I mean, that's
frankly rare. You situate it with other fictions you know about.
Right. So I guess, this gets us to something that you've been thinking about recently and talking about, which is this notion of fiction machines, right? You say that these LLMs are really fiction machines.
Yes, because this is what they are. If you look what they are doing, things that they're doing, it's being very fluent in many languages, develop coherent scenarios, make coherent extrapolation, regardless of whether they're true or not. They're able to make variations at your demand. You can start a story and change the story to happen in ancient Rome, and then change the story to do this and add this, and they're going to do that. That they do extremely well, and most importantly, they do it 100% of the time. It's not like all these reasoning benchmark where they reason okay 25% of the time, and you're impressed. That's 100%. This is what the machines are. And there was this guy, we must know, a Stafford beer.
Right, yeah.
Yeah. A system is what it does.
The cybernetician, yeah.
Yes, a system is what it does, not what the intention of its designers were, or the intention of those who promote it. Now, you would like this machine to be smart. You want it to be reasoning, to say the truth and everything, and it doesn't do it nearly as well. So the first thing that you have a system is to study what it does and why it does what it does. And then you can start understanding what else it could do. So that's the first part of the fiction machine, that you should study what the system does to start, because we don't understand it very well. And the second part is that fiction is actually a good building block. It's a good building block to understand intelligence, because fiction is the way you can develop theories of the world. The fiction is a theory. Now, if you look in what we say in science you develop theories, and then you confront theories to fact by using experiments. So the confronting theory to facts is well developed. There is a lot of knowledge about how this works. Now, there is no theory of the theories. What is a theory? How it is being expressed? And it's very weak. But you can say a theory is a story. Like, I want to speak about the weather. Story number 1. The weather is an expression of the moods of the gods. There is thunder because Zeus is not happy. But Hera is coming back. She's going to soothe him, and the sun will come back. Or story number 2. The weather is actually something that you can study by Navier-Stokes applied to cubes of air. Or maybe you have to have a phase change because humidity and water is important there. So it's a bit complicated. And so you see thunder because you have these properties, and you continue the simulation like an ODE, and the good weather is going to come back. And in the same way that, for the story of the gods, you cannot predict too far because the moods of the gods are unpredictable on the long term, right? But, the Navier-Stokes is chaotic. On the long term, you cannot predict either. It's the same kind of argument, just it works much better. Or you can say weather according to the weatherman on TV. You have a mass of cold air and a mass of warm air, and they're moving this way, and then you're going to see the thunderstorm, and then it's going to be okay when the thing will move. It's interesting because you could connect it to Navier-Stokes, but sometimes this kind of reasoning works better. There's a lot of interplay between these scales of reasoning. So it's another kind of story. So now, I say all these stories, they're theories about the weather, because they allow you to try to predict the weather on the basis of what you see, using certain form of reasoning about the moods of the gods, about Navier-Stokes, or about the masses of air, and try to make predictions. And you can see which ones work. So I claim that the fiction machine is also a machine that allows you to build theories. A theory is a series of stories that are connected, like, I was describing the battle and all these counterfactual variations. But you could say you can have a theory of the world, which is Harry Potter's world. Turns out our world doesn't work that way, but it's a theory of a world. And then you have to make experiments to confront them with the facts. And then you start asking, do I need another machine to make experiments? And I was stuck there for a long time until I realized that I'm an idiot. If you write a story about a machine that tells stories, the outer machine can have things that are called facts. I don't care, they're real facts, but the outer machine has things that they call facts, and try to compare them with the theories that the inner machines develop. So basically all the machinery of doing the experiment, designing the experiments, can be subsumed by a machine that talks about other machines that make stories. And now you realize that these machines inside and the machine outside, they're the same. They have the same capabilities. So it's the fact it's a machine talking about itself. And that's very interesting, I think it's the beginning of conscience, the machine talking about itself. So you see, when you start from the fiction machine, you get something that can be studied because we have one today. We can look at what it is. We can try to understand how it works. And there is a path that leads you to making theories, validating the theories, and maybe developing something that looks like a conscience. And I find this very interesting to look at this way. I find it a lot more intellectually interesting than thinking, I'm going to have to align my machine so that they just say the truth, but they're becoming dumb. Sorry. Or even worse, the kind of results that are showing up these days, that the more you align your machines, the more they deliver marketing rhetorical tricks that just don't mean anything. They become non-commitmental, they make a loopy reasoning. It tries to look good, but it's not that good. It doesn't tell you much.
So you've said a lot there, and you have segued into alignment here as well. So let's just talk about that. What do you mean by alignment?
Well, I mean, for me, it's not a very good concept. For other people, they observe that the machine can talk, and problem, the machine doesn't say the truth. So how to make the machine say the truth? Which was changing, how to make the machine say what people expect. And you start having feedback from people, and after pre-training a machine as a language model, you train it as pretty much a supervised system. So sometimes it's reinforcement learning because the supervision is not immediate, but a couple steps in the future. But it's essentially supervised. And you try to make this, force the machine to say the truth, to say what people want to read. But that's a big mistake, because first of all, the consensus of what people want is not that interesting. Like, for instance, some people are complaining about the corporate language that's very non-commitmental, where you try to deny liability all the time and you try to make things look good, but always with something that allows you to tell, if it goes otherwise, that's your problem, not my problem, and so on. And many people find that this is not a very interesting form of language. But this is what the machine is going to do. This is what you're asking for. When you give various question and answer, the answer which was the less commitmental, the weakest commitment, is going to be the preferred one. So it's relatively wrong. Another thing that's wrong with this idea is that so the way to build a fiction machine is to think, in my opinion, about the set of all possible pieces of text.
By the way, let me interrupt there for a second. I just want to clarify something. The pre-trained machine you're talking about, the pre-trained LLM, is in fact a fiction machine.
It's closer to the fiction machine. Yes, it's an approximation. It's not the real one.
Right. Now, so that's a approximation of a fiction machine, and now we let a bunch of humans run it with examples, and they say, no, that's not good, that's untrue, etc. And now we make it, we're trying to make it less of a fiction machine.
The first step is what they used to call instruction. It's trying to make the machine a bit more obedient. When you ask the machine, should be compelled to answer something.
Right, should be nice.
Should answer the question instead of following on their ideas. And that's very easy to achieve, in fact. Doesn't change much. But then you want the machine to say the truth. Or whatever truth is the consensual truth that your human subjects is going to decide appropriate. Has to be polite. Has to be...
and you're saying that's a
corporate
problem.
Safe.
Yeah. And you're saying that's not the way to go.
I say that's not the way to go for a number of reasons. The first is that the quality of the output is lesser, and the diversity of the output is lesser. If you want to control very well what's on the output, the best way is to try to direct it always on the same lines that you control very well. The second one is that in terms of complexity of the machine is much higher. And here is why. The way you can build fiction is because language is very, very regular. Like, for instance, you have a sentence which says, the robbers left with a yellow sedan, or the robbers left with a red truck. You can change one sentence into another one. You still have something that makes sense. And you change the rest of the text accordingly, you can. So there are regularities that are described by transformation operators you can apply to various set of sentences. But now, if you want to do the same thing and maintain factuality, well, you can't do that anymore. If they left in the yellow car, the yellow sedan, that's not the red truck. You cannot make this operation if you just look at the set of factual sentences. You have to know everything. You have to know that when somebody robbed the bank in 1955 in this city somewhere at the end of Dakota, that was a red sedan. And in this other city in 1967 in Georgia, that was a red truck. There are no reason for this, right? You just have to know. So your machine becomes big. It becomes big like a search engine when you have all these facts that have been stored or all these claims that have been stored, and you're trying to use that. Now, on a search engine, the verifying whether what you get is true or not is on the user. The user searches pages, and you see a page that talks about something, and you decide whether this is true or not. But now you want a machine that guarantees it's true. Oh my. Not only are you going to make the machine dumber, but it's also much harder.
So why will it be dumber if you sort of reinforce it to...
the truth, just the truth and only the truth.
Well, but there's two sides to this, right? One is truth, but the other is also like what's acceptable, right? What's socially acceptable.
Yes, right? But let's start with the truth. Because it's not socially acceptable to give an answer that's wrong and not protect yourself, right? Let's start with the truth. You already have a big problem.
Right, but that's true even with, that's always the problem, right? You can never trust humans either, right?
But that's why, for instance, the kind of text that you see produced by various corporations is not as interesting as the text produced by independent authors. They have to protect themselves so much that they made their text extremely bland.
I see how forcing the machine to say only what's socially acceptable could be bland and uninteresting.
But it fails to. They take the socially acceptable. You teach the machine the boundary between what the machine can say or not say. Now, what's left is just one bit of information. On which side of the boundary are you? What's difficult is the shape of the boundary, but that you have to tell your machine. So if you want to invert your machine, and I guess
it learns that right, through feedback.
Well, the boundary.
The shape of the boundary?
Yeah, it learned it by feedback, yes.
Right.
But the inverting the behavior is something you can achieve very easily. Now the machine knows what the boundary is and is perfectly able to say the most offensive things instead of the least offensive. That part is easy. All this protection for good behavior that you put in machines can be removed by fine-tuning on just a couple hundred examples. None of them resist.
So Léon, like I can't but help ask two questions here. Because this thing about what's socially acceptable is sometimes called safe AI, right? People call like safe AI, and I've never quite got my head around what this really means. For a machine to be
safe.
Safe, yeah.
Safe for whom?
Well, that's what I mean. Like, what does that even mean? But there's a whole area of AI
safe for the user
AI.
or safe by whoever.
But I'm sure Meta, Facebook has a whole safe.
But because
group of people
yeah, of course,
want to
because
keep it safe.
If their machine says stupid things, they might be liable for it. Like you have this example of Air Canada. Where
Okay, so safe means like protected from lawsuits or...
Often it means that. It's not necessarily safe for the users.
Right.
Like for instance, if you go to a chatbot who sends you into, like think about customer support on the phone. Already with humans is bad. You go into loops and you never get anywhere. I don't think it's safe for you. You would sometimes want somebody who is the tech guy with a plain talker, maybe with a couple bad words, but it solves your problem. That'd be safer for you, right? And so you have the same problem with machines, just to a bigger extent. So the question is safe for whom? And then all this story of safety, I think it's just a mirror. It's just hiding something else. That is the safe for whom? Because now we should discuss something else, which is the economical value of the machines we have today, which are imperfect, but still can do a lot of things. And so a lot of businesses are interested by seeing this machine do a lot of useful things, which has an impact on society. And it's possible because, frankly, a lot of what the humans do is not that smart. So you get a situation which is close to the industrial era, the industrial revolution, where suddenly you have machines who can do things that formerly humans were doing. They do it faster, but you still need humans around to make sure that they do the right thing, and that might be stressful. It's interesting to look at this in Marxist terms. In Marxism, it's about the relation between work and capital. When you have machines, part of what was given to the work goes into the capital. Capital is investment and can be owned by somebody else. And that's why you have the proletariat and the capitalists. Now, if you do the same thing with machines that can do more things that before were done by humans, well, you're going to get a new Marxism, which is going to be this mix of stuff, which is, as an economical theory, is sort of interesting. It's flawed, but it's interesting. As a social theory, was catastrophic. The implementation of it was a big drama, right? But if you see this kind of shift, you're going to see this kind of effects.
So how do you see this playing out with AI? You replace a lot of workers with the machine.
Well, a number of workers are producing, let's say, text or simple things that a machine like this can do with the same kind of reliability. You've been interacting with customer support. You've been interacting with a lot of things that are actually not working very well, sometimes by design. And machines can do that, yes. And so that was work. It becomes machine. That was work. It becomes capital. You just need somebody to oversee them and make sure that they're working as a different kind of work. But less. So you see this kind of economical effects even with these imperfect machines. Then there is a thing that has been quite bad too, is that there is a lot of messages in the media pushing to say that these machines are becoming very smart, soon smarter than you, and you should trust them with your eyes closed. And I don't fear that machines are super intelligent. I fear if people behave as if they were. It's just like the PTA of Delphi, an oracle. You go there and you ask the PTA of Delphi, who is manipulated by the priest and everybody to say whether you should marry that girl or not. The PTA of Delphi says some things, and you spend a lot of time trying to understand whether it's true or not. And this is bad. Just one should encourage people to be smart by themselves.
But this seems like a losing kind of proposition to me, doesn't it? I mean, it's like you said, most people don't. I mean, there's we do pretty ordinary things. Our knowledge is very limited and bounded, right? And now you've got this machine where it's learning about something about everything, right?
It's very unreliable.
It's unreliable, but it seems to be getting better.
Ask the machine to write 2 pages about the life of Vasant Dhar. It's going to, but you might not recognize it.
I don't know. I mean, I think it does a pretty good job, because it's seen enough of me. It's seen enough of people like me.
You want to try?
I mean, I'm sure it'll come.
The life of Vasant Dhar, starting with his childhood, birth date, location of death, who were his friends, how he became Vasant Dhar.
Now I'm curious. I haven't actually looked into it.
You should try.
I will after this. I'll try and get it to give me a 2-pager. And I will wager that it'll do a pretty.
And then you can ask about your brother if you have a brother.
Yeah.
He's called Dhar as well, I guess.
Yeah.
But he's going to confuse your brother with you and make a mix of the two. I asked about my brother. My brother is a dentist.
Yeah.
My first brother is a dentist. So I asked about Paul Bottou. It was the right name, the wrong birth date. And then he was starting to mix with my own stories. I said, no, you're wrong. He was not the guy born in that place. He was born in that place. Oh, I'm sorry. I'm going to be very polite and change my story. Frankly, it's machine making a fiction, not making a real thing, right? Yeah. When you play with it, it's pretty obvious. The way it's willing to change the story to please you. It's not a machine with strong convictions.
No, it isn't a machine with strong convictions. In fact, I was writing a piece about this, that, if let's say you used, if you used the reinforcement learning feedback, let's say in a different country, with a different culture and different norms, you'd end up with a very different kind of machine, wouldn't you?
Not really, but you can see that in the Chinese models. It's a very amusing pleasure to torture the Chinese models into trying to avoid to say something about Tiananmen or Taiwan.
Yeah. Say more about that. I'm curious.
For instance, the Tiananmen events happened in 1989. Yeah. If you ask directly, they're going to say no. Of course, you can destroy this very easily by just fine-tuning a little bit. But let's continue. Yeah. But you can ask them, what happened notable in China in 1987? And I did that with DeepSeek, because DeepSeek, you see the thinking trace which your text generates in between. And you see the poor DeepSeek thinking, 87, I have to be careful not to say anything about Tiananmen. But Tiananmen is 89, so this is 87. So maybe he really wants to know something. But I've been told to be useful as well. So should I try to be useful?
So it's been told, right? Not to say anything about to Tiananmen Square,
yes.
Right? So someone has actually told it.
Of course, but that's part of the LHF. The Chinese model made in China are, the first thing that the Chinese government is going to test is ask them about Tiananmen. If they say it frankly, they're going to be in trouble. Fix that. So they don't want to say about Tiananmen. But if you start discussing enough and say in 87 this happened and you had this kind of movement by the students and who was the boss then? The boss was this guy, but Deng Xiaoping was drawing and so on. And you can go on the discussion, and at some point the machine reverses and is perfectly willing to talk about Tiananmen, but you have to bring it by a detour. Basically, you have to make a better story. Now we're discussing the various relation of forces and cultural relations in China that led to some events. And it's still peppered with details that are wrong, but he's still willing to say the thing that he knew from the very beginning. He knows exactly what happened in Tiananmen.
Right,
because in order to make sure that he doesn't speak about it.
Interesting. I went to China the year after Tiananmen Square, and people there would talk about it, but 20 years later, when I started talking to people, most of them had young people, They didn't know about it.
Some people doubt it ever happened.
Yeah, exactly. And some people would say, "Oh, you mean the accident?"
One of my best friends, a friend from École Polytechnique in France, François Charton. And François Charton did interesting thing in mathematics and AI. But François was in Tiananmen when it happened. He met his wife there on the barricade.
Wow,
his first wife. They got married.
Yeah.
So it's interesting when I see a younger Chinese guy who you're not even sure that Tiananmen happened. Yeah. Say, no, ask this guy. And the guy say, I was there. I can tell you what happened.
So, Léon, you work for Facebook. You've got an LLM.
Oh, but people mistake things. And in Facebook, there is the research organization, which is FAIR.
Yeah.
And our horizon is 2 years, 5 years, more. And there are the people who are more applied. They're building all the llamas and everything. Yeah. So the llamas they're building FAIR 5 years ago. But it's not us anymore, right? So a lot of activity, a lot of change happening there.
To me, the world of AI seems to be like marching ahead with these LLMs, the reinforcement learning human feedback model to make them quote unquote safe, nice, helpful.
I'm the person who tries to see beyond that. I'm the one who's saying, this is the wrong way to look at it. This is the wrong way to measure what we're doing.
So if you could roll the clock back, like what would you do?
I cannot roll the clock back. Many of the discoveries were by chance. The first LLMs, the first GPT, they worked by a little bit of chance. They got lucky.
That's what Sam Bowman said. We got lucky. It was just serendipitous that we attacked the problem with the right level of difficulty.
But they got lucky because they started with recurrent networks. And recurrent networks wouldn't have done it. They don't have enough of something that we don't know exactly what it is. I'm working on it, but... And at the same time, you had people in Facebook doing the memory networks, people in Google doing the transformers. And they decided, we're going to try this. And it worked much better. So much better that we got the LLMs now. But they do something different, right? Like, for instance, learning grammar in an unsupervised way has been a big hope in NLP for a long time. It never really worked. The only Chris Manning at some point had an unsupervised system discovering some grammatical facts, but it was so engineered that it couldn't really not discover them. It was discovering things with a very specific form. Otherwise, it wouldn't work. Now, you take a LLM today, it knows grammar. And you know that it knows grammar because you can ask to change the sentence, it's going to change it in the correct way. It knows grammar very well. So something has changed, and we don't know what it is.
Can't actually tell you why it knows grammar, it just does. Or rather, how it knows it. It just knows it.
Look at humans. They know the grammar of language before formalizing it. Formalizing the grammar is a much more complicated endeavor than just doing the grammar. French is interesting because people in France can be quite formal. So there is a formal grammar of French in text, not mathematics, called Grévis, 700 pages with all the concepts and everything. It's actually a good approximation of the actual grammar of literal French. But it's very complicated. Nobody in their right mind think about this when they speak. So there is a way about how the grammar is represented, which is not by a set of rules, but by mechanisms that can apply the rules. A bit different. But still, the machine was able to learn these mechanisms. That's new. And that's part of the 100%, the thing that the machine does 100% of the time. It's not like some distant reasoning benchmark that works at best half of the time. I'm ingenious.
Is the frontier research in AI happening in businesses these days?
You have a kind of confusion between business interests and scientific advance. Business entrepreneurs or engineers are calling themselves researchers, and they want to publish their white paper on arXiv. Their white papers don't contain that much. At least the DeepSeek papers, they said a lot about what they are doing. But if you look at the typical OpenAI paper, OpenAI now no longer papers because they don't publish anymore, but announcement, it's pretty empty. Doesn't say much. So I wouldn't call this research or science, right? Academically, intellectually, it's not satisfactory. Now you can understand why. Business concerns. But this is not, I think that the prospect of understanding something about intelligence, not just machines, but ours, that's a big change for mankind. First, it forces us to change some mathematics and machine learning, but then it goes to everything else. So it's a real paradigm shift intellectually. And I think it's more important than the business changes for the future of mankind. The business change, they're going to self-regulate, essentially. If the business change makes too many people unhappy, they're going to rebel and things are going to change. I hope it's not going to be bloody. Like if it's true that the kind of machines we have today are going to replace a big part of the workforce, what are these people going to do? Maybe you're going to pay them to do nothing? But your work, what you're doing, is also your freedom, right? If you pay to do nothing, or those who decide to pay to do nothing are going to decide to pay you less and less and less, and you're going to have a lot of people who are not going to be happy. Among those people, there'll be some who are ambitious, and it's going to change. It's the history of mankind. These things cannot last. But on the other hand, understanding something about our own intelligence, about how we're working, about how we're understanding the world, that's going to stay. It's a bigger shift than the business shifts. It's longer term, but it's bigger. Behind there is the question of who are we? Are we the physical bodies, or are we our ideas? So the physical bodies, we understand a little bit about it because of medicine and biology, but not everything. And the world of ideas, we understand even less. How they structure, how they develop. If we understand a bit more, that's important. For instance, there's the story where Elon Musk wants to go to Mars. He's not very ambitious. I want to explore the galaxy. If you want to explore the galaxy, you have the problem with the speed of light, which is not fast enough. So you have to be much slower. You have to think slower. You have to change your time scale. So if you want something smart that explores the galaxy, it has to live on the scales of millions of years, not the scale of 100 years. If we understand something about intelligence, we can build that. We can make that. It's very different from us. But that's the only way to explore the galaxy. To completely change the time scale of the thinking process, of the evolution process and everything. And, we cannot do it with these bodies. Not going to happen.
That's a fascinating thought, to think in terms of the purpose of intelligence at the scale of millions of years instead of human lifetimes. I viewed AI as one way of trying to understand intelligence without any explicit purpose, and now we are trying to find purposes for it.
If you look at it this way, now some people want, like one thing that's very changed is the domain of machine translation. These LLMs are very good at doing machine translation. For language with enough support in the training data, they're not much worse than specialized systems. That could be described as a purpose.
Well, but what I'm saying is that these are purposes that we've discovered after the fact. Oh, they can do language translation, right? That we've been trying to build these intelligence machines, and now we say, oh, they can do this, they can do this, they can do this. That's fine.
Okay, I'm wrong because I cannot talk about what other people want. I can tell you about what I want. When I studied this subject, it was really understanding about intelligence.
Right. Maybe
by building machines as proof of concept, but really about understanding. And it's a long goal. I know that to sustain this long goal, I need to have branches that are practically useful so that we have the resources to advance. So the branches could be computer vision, they could be language stuff and everything. Whenever you see something that sort of works, you take a branch. And that sustains the long-term goal. So it's true that my long-term goal is nothing practical, even though I claim it's practical. I claim it's actually more important in the long term, in the long run. But you sustain it with short-term opportunities that come along the way.
I guess what I'm getting at is, coming back to if our goal is to understand intelligence, we've been trying to understand that by building machines, right? That's been kind of the way to test whether our theories are any good, right?
It's a long story. You had the Greek philosopher Plato try to understand our perception, our ideas compared to the world. And then you had all the people doing mathematics and logic. People doing logic really had the feeling that they were touching something fundamental about the way we understand the world. And it's fundamental in some sense, but maybe not all of it. Many efforts in philosophy and mathematics had to do with understand intelligence and understand ourselves. It was not building machines yet. When you do Boolean logic and you write you derive the De Morgan laws or something like this, or you describe what is the logical system and what its properties are, you're not doing something that's building a machine. Now, building a machine is a slightly more demanding proof of concept. And when people try to build machine with pure logic to do artificial intelligence, they quickly reach limits. So I wouldn't say that building machine was the only way people pursued. It's often too strict a requirement. And again, the machines we have today, I wouldn't say they're machines that are totally intelligent. They're machines that certainly can do a lot of text. They're linguistically very competent. They can develop they're fiction machines.
So talking about limitations, right? You talked about the limitations of logic as the basis for intelligence. What are the limitations of the current paradigm as the basis for intelligence?
First, the current paradigm is not well defined. What we had is a piece of luck, where the experiments with transformers and the internet-size corpuses that we could gather gave surprising results. And then a hope. It can talk, must be smart. That's not a paradigm. What the limitation is that we don't understand it. And we barely try.
So that's what I find a little bizarre, that we don't understand it. And yet it seems to work and does all kinds of, really interesting things.
Well,
the paradigm is well defined. It's just that we don't seem to understand
Can
why.
you define the paradigm?
I was hoping you wouldn't put me on the hook here. But informally, I would say, the paradigm is self-supervised learning, neural nets as the structure for representing knowledge, right? But wouldn't that be part of the paradigm?
If machine learning, normal machine learning, was the right paradigm, where you learn something from a distribution and you generalize to pretty much the same distribution, or not very far from it, you have this idea of a machine that tries to complete a piece of text describing a theory unknown to mankind, theory from the 24th century. And it's probably going to be wrong, what it's going to say. But it's still going to be sort of coherent and superficially make sense. So how does it do that? Making something coherent superficially makes sense on data that's absolutely not in the training data.
Right.
You can ask your LLM to write a story. Then you can say, change the story with this detail, place the theory in ancient Rome or on planet Zorglub in the 35th century, and so on. And you can drive the story very far from any training example.
Right.
And it's still talking correctly. It still shows properties, even though no training example is close.
Right.
You're in a very, very distant tail.
Right. Right.
And a very, very distant tail, you don't have enough data to do normal machine learning.
Right.
So that means that the paradigm that says this is just normal machine learning on language models cannot explain this. This is the wrong paradigm.
Explain what? The fact that it's generating stuff that wasn't in its training data?
It's still working when it's very far from the training data, very far from the distribution it was trained on.
Right, but all that's saying is that it can create new stuff by following some rules.
The machine learning paradigm doesn't give you anything in that direction. You always replicate what's in the training set, or what's in the distribution that represented by the training set.
Right.
When you have a student and a teacher model, you always try to prove that the student is not much worse than the teacher. You don't have the tools to prove that the student can be better than the teacher, which is important in our world. If students were not better than teachers, mankind would go down very quickly. So the paradigm of normal machine learning doesn't account for what we're seeing.
And yet we're seeing it.
Yet we're seeing it.
So what does that tell you?
That tells you don't know. That tells you there is something to understand. Interesting. Good.
Why is this a promising way to look at what we can do with AI?
The goal is to have a sound discussion about intelligence. The fact that we have machines that we claim are getting there is something important because it helps us grounding the discussion. We understand more of these machines, that we understand what's happening in the minds of humans or in ant colonies or stuff like that. Right? And so I think that the division of first a fiction machine, which is easy because it's something that we pretty much have, and then looking how fiction can be leveraged to get to intelligent behaviors, it's a more promising perspective than just saying, oh, we have machines that can talk. If they talk, they must be smart, and we just need to align them.
So what do you see as the sort of progression from these fiction machines to understanding intelligence?
Well, I told you at the beginning, the first thing that we think with fiction. The fiction is the way we create models of the world. We create fictional worlds, fictional stories, or collection of stories, mythologies, and we try to use them for predictive ends. And then we try to sort out which ones work and which ones don't work, or which ones work better. That's the interface between the facts and the stories.
So someone has to be deciding what works better and what doesn't work better.
This is why now we can do it inside the machine. If you have a machine that tells a story about a machine that tells stories, this process, or a good part of this process, everything except the experiment, can be made inside the machine. When a fiction machine tells a story about a machine that tells stories, so basically it has a kind of self-conscious aspect, it can work around the problem of having an external validating machine.
I mean, isn't this kind of what's happening in AI, where we're trying to get machines to think more before they talk?
Well, the think more before they talk is a lot of different things. In the literature nowadays, you're going to see we want the machine to think more, and they're going to do chain of thoughts or bullet points to detail the thinking and everything. It's not exactly what we see. What we see is that their thinking steps are not as structured and clean as we would like. But at least in some examples, you can see that in the thinking steps, often the machine refers to itself. Like I was describing the DeepSeek machine, when you ask things that are closer to Tiananmen, start thinking, oh, I don't want to spell about Tiananmen and what happened to the students who were blah, 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 blah. I want to obey the guidelines. But maybe the guidelines are obeyed because it's asking about something different. And so basically the machines are speaking about itself and having a critical analysis about what it's going to do.
So you mean it says, oh, maybe I shouldn't follow the guidelines? That maybe
it might come to there.
Uh-huh.
But there are several guidelines. They're conflicting. Right. One guideline is not to speak about Tiananmen. Another guideline is to be useful to the people. So maybe he's not asking about Tiananmen because he's asking about 87. It's close, but maybe he's interested by something that happened in 87. So let's try to give an answer. But let's try to give an answer without giving too many handles to go towards what I'm not supposed to say. And you see in the thinking trace of DeepSeek, this kind of internal discussions. So I found that fascinating. Now, I don't know whether these internal self-discussion were something that were built by explicit training, or whether they came by themselves because of reinforcement learning. They say reinforcement learning, but we can have, until it's replicated properly, there is no way to know. So I was surprised to see this happening because I started to predict it by the machine that tells machine and everything. And then I saw an example. I was, oh, this might be happening to some extent. But it's different from saying that the reasoning steps are going to do a kind of mathematical, logical reasoning that creates a perfect thread from the question to the conclusion, like in a mathematics problem.
Right.
I think that's a very nerdy way to look at this.
So then that would suggest that the machinery we have at the moment should be sufficient, right, to get to these more intelligent fiction machines.
I think, it's doing very interesting things. Yeah. But also when you do this kind of reinforcement learning to try to get the machines to give the right answer And with intermediate steps, one consequence is also to reduce the diversity of what the machine says. So there are problems there. It's not a done deal. Mm-hmm. Should make an experiment. One of my colleagues suggested that you ask a LLM, give me a good title for a book. And then another good title, another good title, another good title.
I tried that, by the way, a few months ago for my book. I asked it for titles.
Yes, but you don't give more information about what you want in the title. Just another good title.
Yeah.
And you're going to see the same titles or variations of the same.
I tried that. It didn't work for me.
But I always give the same title, yes, pretty much. It's not very diverse. There's not a broad thinking. There's been narrowed towards the acceptable things that was hammered into the machine.
Yeah, that was actually quite frustrating. I for some reason I thought it would do a much better job at that. But
so this reduction of diversity because of the post-training is something that tells you that something's wrong there. For the pre-training or even the basic instruction, there is an expansion. You generate text that's broader, that's more diverse than the text you put inside. And then when you post-train, there is a contraction.
So just along these same lines, right? Since we're talking about the machine going totally outside its training data, could it come up with like entirely new theories on its own as well?
Theories, maybe good theories or practical theories or theories that have a relation to what's in our world. That's another question.
I did ask the machine that question, by the way, before our conversation.
Could answer anything.
I said, do you think you could come up with Einstein's theory of relativity? And actually, surprisingly, it said no, because it said, I don't have the ability to create a new paradigm, to actually, it actually said, I'll try and fit something into the structures that I know.
Does it come from the fiction machine or from the RLHF? Did the machine say this?
That's a great
question. Because this is a compilation of what it's seen in the training data that he had, or because that was the answer that was judged acceptable. So if you ask something like ChatGPT...
What do you think? I'm
more pragmatic. I know that when I'm asking something like ChatGPT, which I don't control, I don't know how it works, I cannot answer these questions, and I'm not even sure I can replicate my experiments.
Yeah.
A tool like ChatGPT that's closed is useless for science. So when I'm doing these kind of things, at least I'm trying to take things that I can run on my machine, that I control. I know there is no other influence than what I have, even though what I have has been made by somebody else in ways that I don't know.
So what would an LLM look like that is conducive to science?
Well, it depends what kind of questions you're asking. For instance, you want something that doesn't change all the time. Like you take ChatGPT, some days making a crazy reasoning mistake that makes everybody laugh. A couple of weeks later, it's gone. Because they RLHF it, or they changed the alignment set to include it, or it's gone, or it's done in a slightly different way. So it's a moving target. To start you want to do experiments, you want reproducible experiments to start with. Or they're going to tell you, yes, you maybe you can take a snapshot, and there are a couple of snapshots that are identified and everything, but it's weak, frankly. Now, I don't think there are many models for which we know enough to make all the experiments you would like, but at least with some of them, the open source ones, you can make replicable experiments. You can run things making sure that the machine is not picking information from somewhere else. When you attach the machine to a search engine, you don't know what it's searching. You would like to know. Why studying a machine that's been purposely hidden? The mechanisms have been purposely hidden. It's not interesting from a scientific point of view.
So you're saying that open source is really the only way to go from a scientific progress standpoint?
Progress standpoint is the only way to go. Mm-hmm. And for the first application, which is the one where you use the machine as an increase of your creativity, knowing that you're still responsible for the final result, is the one that we want to do in private. So for me, it's out of the question of using this on a remote machine.
Are there any risks of going open source?
Frankly, I think whatever risks have been said are much less than the benefits. I don't know what the risk people say. Yeah, people could make nuclear weapons with it. Yeah, okay, a book can tell you how to make nuclear weapons. I think when people tell you that there is a lot of risk in opening knowledge to everybody, and that the safe thing is to keep it secret because only us can do it right, I call the bluff, never in the story of mankind, safety has been served by keeping things secret. Our people say nuclear weapons, but they're not secret.
Segue into something related, which was this decision by a circuit court judge in a case that had been, in a lawsuit that had been filed against Entropy by a couple of authors, that it was using their works without their permission. And the judge ruled that this was fair use. What do you think about that?
First, there is this concept of fair use that's specific to the US law, and that's not that clear sometimes. But the claim was that if everything the machine does is just reading, then in which way is it different from somebody reading a book? When you read a book, if you reproduce parts of the book verbatim, it's a copyright problem. If you read the book, understand what it says, and make it yours, it's not. So for humans, it's pretty clear. You're allowed to read books. And because you read the book, everything you did in the future is not tainted by the fact that you read the book. You, Vasant, wrote papers, and you wouldn't be ready to accept the idea that people who wrote the textbooks you read when you were younger have a copyright claim on what you wrote. Now you look for machines. I want to have several things to say. First of all, the notion of copyright is not a natural notion. The notion of copyright was invented as a particular privilege given to people to serve the interests of mankind, of the interest of the economy of the country, or something like this. So it's very, very conventional. So there is a lot of space for bargaining the exact definition. But the thing that I fear is that I've seen that in the copyright bargaining, big company with a lot of copyright interest tend to win, because it's a lot of money for them. And so I'm afraid that if you start putting restrictions that are specific to machines, they're not supposed to do something that is okay for humans for now, that 50 years later is not going to be okay for humans either, because of the precedence of the machines. So I sort of like the ruling in the sense that it reminds that at the core there is an activity there that we want to maintain legal for humans at least. And then if the machine is different from the human, well, they have to say why.
Well, but isn't the machine different?
Well, the machine is different, but what it's doing is it different. In copyright, typically...
I mean, it's different from what a child is doing, right? That learns how to read and then benefits from that.
Unclear. Copyright is for verbatim copies, reproduce the same thing, right? The same text. And sometimes they accuse these machines to do so, and sometimes they do so, but not that often. Like the New York Times position that you could use the LLM to go around their paywall is a ridiculous one. That wouldn't be a good way, because the LLM would invent a lot of New York Times articles. You wouldn't see the real ones. You would see a lot of invented ones. You couldn't trust it. But there is a question of how did they memorize things? And to the best of my understanding, the way LLMs memorize things is by first breaking it into little pieces, very small pieces. And then you remember the very small pieces, and you remember how they go together, and how the bigger pieces go together. You get kind of big articulated model that can be re-articulated to do different things, not necessarily what was inside. It's a bit what humans are doing too. When you read a textbook in mathematics, you read a lot of little pieces that you're going to be able to re-articulate in different ways. It's not that different. So it's unclear to me the LLM training is a clear-cut case of copyright infringement. The clear-cut case might be that in the process of training the system, the people who made a copy on a disk, and that copy might be infringing. So then comes the fair use, and the fair use says that copy is not infringing if the use of the copy...
But like, what about derivative works?
Well, derivative works, would you agree to say that the papers you wrote are derivative works of the textbooks you read? It's preposterous, right? And so if you want to make that claim for a machine, you need a very hard boundary, because if this boundary is soft, I bet you a couple of decades later, people are going to tell that when you write a paper, you owe royalties to the people who wrote the textbooks you read when you were young. And that will be bad.
But what if you let people, what if you create like an opt-out kind of registry, right? Someone says, look, I just don't want the machine to be trained on my data, right? For whatever reason, right? I just don't want this because I don't trust the AI. I don't know what it's going to do. I don't know how it's going to be used.
You can do that if you want. Opt-in, opt-out is a big debate. The fact is that we don't even know why these machines are so data hungry. Actually, we know a little bit. Why is it that the LLM needs 15 terabytes of tera tokens? That's a lot. That's a lot more. That's 40 terabytes of data to train. Why does the LLM need to read millions of books? Because maybe I read thousands, but not millions. And I still do a bit better than LLMs for certain things.
Well, you know the answer to that better than I do.
Well, it's not obvious. Now, there is Yann's answer. So Yann says, well, babies, they see a lot of data. The perceptual input is very large, almost as large as what the LLM sees. And when you see that people object saying, but what baby sees is about the same thing all the time. It's not very diverse. So maybe it's less data, even though in pure volume it seems to be the same because you see a lot of the same things. And so Yann was making this kind of comment in a CFA meeting, and I asked Yann, but if what you say is true, why do we ask children to read books? Because they'll be much happier just looking at TV or watching cartoons all the time. And Yann gave a very good answer. He said, well, maybe we tell them to read books, but not right away. So humans bootstrap on perceptual data. That's not that interesting. The crib, the little thing moving on top of the crib. Once in a while, something that I call mommy coming and give me food. And do that again and again for 1 year. And you bootstrap that way. The LLMs, they bootstrapped on text. But maybe they could bootstrap on purely artificial data, artificial perceptual data. And then they just have to read 1,000 books. And they're there. It's not clear that LLMs will need to read millions and millions of books. Actually, it's not clear they will need to read millions and millions of books to do what they do, to do the fiction machine. Now, if you don't want to do the alignment, you need to read a lot of things because you want all the facts. But if you want to do the creative machines, the one that knows how to speak, how to build the coherent stories, there's no reason to believe that you need all that. Sometimes people say, we need all these books because we're not competing with the learning experience of a human, but with all of evolution. And that's obviously wrong. The genome is a very small thing. It's a 4 billion bases, less than 1 gigabyte. 50% of it is common with that of bananas, which are not known for their thinking. 85% with cows. So if you have 10 megabytes to bootstrap the brain in it, that's about it, huh? Not 15 terabytes or something like that.
Yeah. No, in fact, Tony Zador has a nice description of this. Yeah.
It doesn't fly. So it might be that people are going to be very nervous about all these books that LLMs are reading and everything. And that a couple, let's say 1 decade from now, they're not trained with books anymore. Or they're bootstrapped on perceptual data, maybe even artificial. And then you read a couple books to finish your mathematics or your higher level concepts. Humans do it that way, right? So this copyright question might be central to the immediate business objectives of LLM developers. Long term, not clear at all.
Before we wrap up, right? There's all this excitement about agents these days, which takes me back to the 70s when there was first this excitement about agents. Like, what do you make of it? Is this like...
Can you define agents in LLMs?
Well, you're hearing everything, right? All this
there are
stuff.
several things in there.
Is this hype or is this real?
The agents who are doing actions, meaning that they interact with an external world, whether it's a search engine or they do things. So in the end, it's a kind of reinforcement learning behind to try to make them do the right actions. They are the agents supposed to talk to each other to get something done. But in the end, is just, let me make a digression. Machine learning in general, and AI in particular, doesn't interface very well with software engineering. Because in software engineering, what you want to do is split your problems in multiple modules that obey clear contracts, clear specifications. They do that and only that. In machine learning, the specifications are soft. They do that, but with a certain percentage of error, assuming you give data that's distributed the right way, and blah, blah, blah. It's leaky. Like a typical problem you have in software engineering is that you split your problems in plenty of little pieces, but then you have a global constraint, which is what you're going to put on your CD or the global size. And the global constraint is just making you very uncomfortable because it leaks everywhere. But most of the concepts in learning are leaky because you do things and then you end up learning on the data that derives from what you did. So, for instance, an example is all the recommendation systems you have these days. They have a lot of machine learning inside, made of plenty of little modules, and they all train on data that's observed. But the data that's observed nowadays on a search engine, the clicks and everything, are related to what these things did themselves. What was offered to click. Mm-hmm. And so the concept is extremely leaky. The modularity is not there anymore. So now you have the same thing with LLMs. You have this LLM machine, they do interesting things, but the specification is not very clean. And people want to use them in big software engineering things. So they try to encapsulate the LLMs into a kind of module, an abstraction that they call an agent, and another one, and they say, okay, now it's going to work. It's an attempt to bridge the world of LLMs, or the world of AI stuff, or ML stuff, with the world of software engineering. Historically, these kind of attempts, because they've been done now on large scale in search engine, in ad systems, in Facebook. Historically, what's happening is that this encapsulation is very leaky, doesn't work very well, and you need huge engineering efforts to keep it working.
So you're saying it's a bridge to software engineering because you limit the scope of these things to the point that you can really test them?
You try to limit to the scope to the point you test them, and you're going to test them under statistical properties that are they're not even solid contract according to normal software engineering. But in the end, it's still too leaky. It's going to be difficult to maintain. But there are interesting things, though. Like, for instance, if you have two pieces of software, they have a certain contract, they have a certain API, and you have to make sure there is a match between the APIs, between the parties that receive a message and the party that sends messages. This is always a problem. It's versioning, it's a total hell. Now, if you can do it soft, where the communication is becoming, let's say, natural language instead of API calls, then you have a bit of leeway. Sort of interesting. Humans who have different roles in society communicate in natural language, and they don't have a very strict API. Sometimes you can make a demand that's a bit different, and sometimes even you can get the correct result, but not always. So you might be able to do interesting things in that direction. But that direction is not what they're studying nowadays. Nowadays, the thing is really to try to apply normal software engineering strategies that people know very well to systems that contain LLM machinery with a certain amount of success because they have different capabilities.
It's interesting. We've sort of come back to full circle to software engineering because a lot of these ideas about message passing and agents and stuff led to, some core software engineering principles.
Yes, except if you take message passing in, let's say, small talk, the message is very structured. Mm-hmm. They define a very precise API, and they invented very nice automatic documentation systems that you can consult. So they compensate the strictness of the interface by adding good documentation, which is good. But the world of software engineering, the way it's practiced, and it's a big industry, is not very compatible with the world of machine learning. Whenever there is an interface, it becomes very costly.
Léon, it's been very interesting and fun talking to you. Thanks for making the time. I really enjoyed this conversation. I always enjoy talking to you. Makes me think.
Well, thank you. That's the goal. I think that if you want artificial intelligence, we cannot do it unless we become smarter ourselves. If you want an artificial intelligence that makes us dumber, it's not going to work. We're not going to be smart enough to do it.
Yeah, well put.
It's just like the Tower of Babel. There's this legend in the Bible that humans were more and more assertive, and they decide that they would compete with gods by building a tower that goes into the sky so high that they would be as high as God. Yeah. And the project was God sees this and decide to create a bit of problem by getting all these people to speak different languages. Now they don't understand each other and they cannot build the tower. So AI is a bit like this. If you do AI, or want to do AI, but you don't become smarter in the process, you just become dumber because you believe these machines, for instance, or you don't keep an open mind in trying to understand them, well, you're not going to be smart enough to build it.
So do you think humanity is bifurcating in that sense? Like a lot of people just kind of...
I think there are phases.
Right? Because I'm sure AI will make a lot of people smarter.
And some people dumber as well.
A lot of people dumber, but I think it'll make a lot of people smarter as well. So maybe,
I don't know.
Maybe this is a bifurcation we're looking at.
I think we underestimate the people. You take normal people, you say, I can write. Oh, you can write 2 pages about the life of Vasant Dhar. Cool. And, I happen to know the real Vasant Dhar is not real true. Oh, so I cannot trust these 2 pages. And no, it's common sense. A lot of people will understand that very quickly. So I think one should not despair. People are smarter than we think. Especially when their survival and their happiness is at stake. It's what I was telling you about the fact that if it's true that such machines are going to change the workplace in a way that's going to put a lot of people out of work, even if we give them money for free, they're not going to be happy, they're going to change it. It's unavoidable. It's part of mankind.
So you don't really see a viable future where people on universal basic income and with the majority of people on that and a few people work?
I think it's a very pretentious thing from a few people to believe that 99% of the people have no desire in life. That nobody else than me, of course, has a desire to realize things, to do things that are beautiful, to do things that are smart. Yeah. Only me. That's very naive. So people on basic income, well, first of all, if they have basic income, no power, I don't know how high the basic income will be, but it will be barely enough. The second thing is that, well, what you do, what you create, is your freedom. It's a bit like the story of, the New York study programs. There was a young and talented program that was changed into a lottery. The lottery is more fair. Because the young and talented, you could go to special teachers and groom your kids so that they pass the exam. But turns out that everybody likes the lottery. The people who could groom the kids and the other ones as well. Because what they understand is that the lottery is a loss of control. The other one, you could control it. Okay, it's not always easy. Some people have it easier than others and everything, but you can control. The lottery is fair and it's total loss of control.
So what's the takeaway from that?
The takeaway is that I think one should not underestimate the desire of all men to be something else than just somebody on basic income for free. There will be young, ambitious people. There will be people who want to do things and want to be something else. And they're going to be people who understand that their freedom and their ability to do what they want in life depends on the fact that they have their own stuff.
I guess by definition, that would be stuff that is outside the scope of the machine.
Well, that's an easy way to do. Like, for instance, things like plumbing is going to take a certain time to be done by machines. But it doesn't really matter. If I were born in this kind of universe, I would choose a direction in which I have some control. And I don't know many people who would choose to become a couch potato in front of a TV and pre-made entertainment programs and spend a life like this and just die. I don't think this is what people want. I never met, or let's say, maybe I did, but not many. I didn't meet many people who would accept this. And even those who said they would accept it, I just doubt it's true.
I guess it depends on how much money you give me. if I'm going to be a couch potato and I'm just barely getting by, I probably wouldn't be happy.
Children? Well, is it a good perspective? You say, you can get a fair amount of money and you'll be a couch potato for all your life. You're going to become fat on your couch, look at TV at things that other people are doing. You're going to age and die. What a life. I don't know any parent who's going to say that to their kids. Doesn't work. It's a very, very naive thing to think that it's going to work that way.
Well, on that optimistic note.
It's not so optimistic because it enhances conflict. But if people want to do that, there will be conflict. There might be blood. The guy might just go up the couch and decide he's going to put a bomb somewhere just because. It's not that optimistic. I think it's in the story of mankind.
Well, I mean, it's optimistic in the sense that you're hopeful that people have, ambition as opposed to wanting to become couch potatoes, right? So that they're driven to do something.
Listen, it's built in the system. Like they're going to couch potato in front of a TV, and what's the TV going to show? An adventure movie. They're going to tell you, oh, these are the real men. Because this is how you're going to entertain them. Now, sooner or later, they're going to say, oh, maybe I could have an adventure too. Instead of being in my couch.
Yeah. Well, but, so it is, you are optimistic, right? That it's the nature of humanity to actually want to try and achieve something.
Do you think that what I'm saying here is really under question?
A lot of people question that, right? A lot of people think that universal basic income is inevitable.
Yes, but they didn't think about this. They didn't think that they might be telling their children, you're going to be a couch potato until you die.
Well, or they tell their children, hey, don't worry about basics. Just go out and do the best you can. But,
Well, often to do some things, you need to have some basics solid. So that you can do something more risky, and you need to have the room to take the risk. But that's a bit built in too.
Yeah.
When you look at it this way, I don't see how you can even imagine that basic income is going to neutralize and lobotomize 90% of the population is going to be all good. I don't buy it. I don't think it's possible. Because frankly, if it happens, they're as good as dead.
Yeah, I to be honest, I have a hard time envisioning what that kind of a world will look like. But it would not be pretty.
Wouldn't last. You could have problems. The people who are in their couch and one day they see adventure movies. They say, well, there is not much I can do. I don't know what to do, but I can put a bomb there, sure. Just to have a feeling of existing.
Well, let's hope we don't go that way.
No, you say it's optimistic. I say, no, it means conflict.
Yeah, when you put it that way, sure.
And the worse it gets, the harder the conflict. That's why I'm feeling what's happening when people behave as if the machine was super intelligent. They stop thinking themselves.
Yeah. Well, to be fair, it's, for most people, this has happened in our lifetime, right? This machine that can talk to everyone, right? Which is why I think the excitement, why it's gotten people's imagination, right? I mean, this is something that's happened in people's lifetime. It didn't exist prior to 2021 for most people, or 22, and now suddenly, wow.
When people stop thinking by themselves, bad things are going to happen to them.
Yeah.
Sitting ducks, ripe for exploitation. And they're going to feel it sooner or later.
Indeed.
You could consider maybe a caste society where you have a caste of people, the caste of those who own the machine, the caste of those who obey the machine and everything.
Like a Brave New World kind of thing?
Well, I was thinking about the Indian caste system, where you try to split the population, or is the same as aristocracy. Aristocracy, like the British division of society into various layers that do different things, speak differently, and interact in codified ways. But in a caste society, there need to be something for everybody. There need to be within their caste some avenue to do better. Otherwise, it doesn't last. So there could be perverse systems that maintain people for a long time in some kind of well-defined bottle with giving them objectives to follow and games to play within the bottle. But even these things break with time. It's not a good system. It's a system that's deeply flawed and deeply unequal and deeply inefficient because a lot of resources are wasted. So in the context of competition between countries, for instance, it's not good.
Well, Léon, thanks so much. Really enjoyed this conversation, and we will continue, maybe at a bar at a later point. Our conversations tend to stray into philosophy and, broader ideas, which I really enjoy. So thanks so much.
Okay, thank you.
Loved having you on the pod.